Welcome to The Quill and the Quantum, the podcast where we explore the intersection of artificial intelligence and the art of writing. I'm your host, Kathy Norris, and in each episode, we'll talk to those authors and other creatives who use or refuse to use AI in their writing process. Today's guest is Reagan Jackson, who is an author, an artist, and an activist, as well as being the co-executive director of Young Women Empowered. This organization provides mentorship-based programs for young women and gender-expansive youth in the Seattle, Washington area. Reagan, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kathy.
So I'm going to ask, because this is part of Authors on the Air, what are you reading these days? Is there anyone that has really, caught your eye or grabbed your attention, um, uh, whether it be anything published or on the web or what?
I'm always reading a couple of different things at the same time. So I've kind of like there's my serious book, and
Okay,
then
all
there's my
right, all
lighter
right.
book. So at the moment, I'm reading a book by a fascinating woman. She's a cardiologist and a guru named Kavita, and it's called The Heart of Wellness, and it's just all about kind of ways to practice physical practices that you can do to get healthier, but also kind of set yourself free from the limitations of societal expectations, like pushing back on some of our conditioning to find spaces of more joy.
Oh, that sounds really deep. Would you repeat the name and spell the name of the author again?
Yeah, it's Heart of Wellness. I'm not sure if I can spell Kavita.
Oh, no, no worries. What I'll do is I will follow up with it, and for our listeners, I'll put it on the website so that you can connect to it. Um, Definitely. No, it sounds fascinating. It sounds fascinating.
Mhm.
How about your own writing? I know that you've got a book coming out fairly shortly,
I
and you.
do. Yeah, no, I'm really excited about it. It's called Still True: The Evolution of an Unexpected Journalist, and it's coming out with Hinton Publishing on March 26th. So looking forward to releasing that.
Okay, fantastic. I'll also provide a link to that work as well. Um, We'll jump on in then. Reagan, when was the first time that you became aware of AI and its potential impact on your world?
Well, I'd say the first time was kind of through social media. All of a sudden, people kept popping up with these really interesting, like, futuristic profile pictures. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, "What is that? Like, how do you do that?" And so, of course, I feel like me and a whole bunch of other people were like, "Oh, let me just check it out." So, you upload your image, and then the AI like makes these versions of you, like comic book or I don't know.
Uh-huh.
It just felt very for me like a cool Afrofuturist aesthetic, and I got like really like, oh, these are cool. I really like these images that the computers are generating. And then as soon as I kind of started posting them, I got some folks who were pinging me to be like, you're stealing from artists, and I was like, how am I stealing from artists? Like, what am I doing? And they're like, that's what the AI is doing. It's taking our art and making this kind of soulless replicas is how they were how they
Hmm.
were positioning it to me. And I was like, oh no, that sounds awful.
That's not my intent at all.
No, no. And I certainly, I don't want to deprive artists from their artistry. I just thought it was something cool, but I hadn't really thought more deeply about what the implications of AI would be.
Hmm. Well, that's interesting because I think I started this podcast around the time of the SAG-AFTRA strike and the writers' strike. And
Hmm.
so I had not lots of, but I had at least two. I had a director and I had a writer and an actor talking about, their main goals, which was compensation and consent, in wanting to consent to the use of their images, and to be compensated for doing it. And that was my first exposure to the fact that, especially in the large language models, that they're absorbing, you know, uh, I'm just gonna say a lot of data that the artists are simply not getting compensated for. So
Yeah, that, and I'm not with it. Like, I'm that person at the grocery store who, like, even if there's no line at the self-check, I'm and there's a really long line with the checker, like, I'm gonna go through the checker, and I think part of that too is, having been a community organizer with United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 21 here in Seattle for a couple of years, like, I really have seen the ways in which computers have stolen people's jobs.
You know, it's so funny because the reason that I go through the lines with the checkers is I like that human interaction. I
Mhm.
like to even though it's just, "Hi, how you doing?" I don't have to worry about what's the barcode for the vegetable. I
Yeah.
mean, I just and I realized because for a while the store, there was an Amazon Fresh near me that had, that offered you, contactless and a contactless experience. And I would leave the store feeling a bit like something had been missing. And it was only then that I realized how much I valued that little bit of that little tiny bit of
Mhm.
interaction, that little laugh, that little smile. It was only then that I realized how much I missed it. And so, even though it's $10 more, what the heck?
Well, also there are in other countries, there are whole grocery lines that are, like, set up for elders specifically, because that is maybe, like, one of the ways that they get that moment of conversation. So they can go through the slower line and actually, like, enjoy their interaction and not feel rushed by the people behind them, like, it's designated. So there's, like, a lot of different ways you can do that. For me, I feel like the pandemic in some ways has made me more introverted in that
Mhm.
my job and my work is so extroverted. I'm so like inundated with people all the time that like the last thing I want to do is have an interaction at a grocery store. But I do it on principle because whether I want to interact or not, I want somebody to have that job.
Oh, most definitely. My father used to say to me, "Well, who do they think is gonna buy the goods and services if nobody has a job?" And even back then in I think it was, junior high or whatever, middle school it is now, it just made sense, yeah, if people aren't earning income, then there's no outgo. It's just that simple. But, in any event, so that was your introduction to AI, and I can remember that. So now we fast forward to today,
Mhm.
and do you use AI in any of your creative processes today?
Absolutely not.
And I'm loving this. Talk to me, Reagan. Why, explain to our audience what it is, because you vehemently said, "Absolutely not, girl." So,
It's a no for me. Like it's the closest I get to like technology interacting with my writing is I write on using a computer. That's a concession I'll
mhm.
make because I do feel like it's just more efficient. It's faster, but I definitely it took me a while to even want to do that. Like I was definitely and remain a person who carries a notebook in my purse at all times in case inspiration strikes and I need to write something down, and a lot of my best work is like written on the back of cocktail napkins or
I
like
love it.
whatever was available. um so yeah, like it's one of those things where oftentimes I feel like the world is evolving at such a clip, at such a quick pace that we don't often have time to like integrate or to really think through like the implications of the ways in which technology is evolving. And for me, AI is a really good example of that. And that now, for example, you can use Chat GBT to like write a cover letter or write
Mhm.
your laundry list or whatever. Like you can just kind of feed it information and it can organize thoughts for you. But to me, like that's my job. Like, my job is to think and to engage with my own thoughts, organize them, and put them together in the correct order, in the correct sequencing that,
Uh-huh.
is communicates what it is that I wanna say with precision and with beauty and power, and, these robots need to back up off my job.
I hear you. I think the one thing I discovered as I experimented with AI, generative AI, not the stuff that spell checks and whatnot, but I realized that writing was my way of fine tuning what I thought.
Mhm.
And it was only when I'd gone through a couple of drafts that I realized I'm getting closer to the truth of what I'm trying to express. But that first knee jerk, just get words on paper, um, uh, it does isn't anywhere close.
We need that, I think, as writers. We don't you can't spiritually bypass a rough
Mhm.
draft. Like, you need to engage with what the raw material is to get to that more refined piece of thought. And with AI, like, I don't it it unnerves me a little, the idea
Yeah.
that it could just think that it's replicating something. And I guess the thing that's scary to me is I've seen it produce things that are coherent, but without a real understanding or of uh, a depth of exchange. Like, one of the things I talk about when I talk about the work that's coming out in my book, because my book is a collection of articles and essays and the story of a decade of my journalism.
Mhm.
And when I frame what this collection has meant for me, I talk about this as some of my most expensive writing.
Hmm.
And that not because, it cost a lot, of money. I'm not talking about financially expensive. I'm talking about what it cost me to write those pieces, what I had to live through, what I had to synthesize, what I had to learn and understand, become, endure, to get to the other side where I could write this piece. And I feel like, yeah, AI is cheap. For as expensive as the technology is, it hasn't earned the right to distill our humanity.
That's very powerful. I want to sit in that for just a moment. I'm wondering, do you still think you can tell the difference between pieces that are written by AI and pieces that are not written or that are written by human beings?
Probably not,
Mhm.
because AI still is like a byproduct of human beings. So I mean, maybe sometimes I'll see things that the cadence feels mechanical or robotic or something like that. But I also think the technology has become very sophisticated at the mimicry of our speech patterns. And that's another way in which I think it's dangerous. And that I actually heard Bettina Judd. She's a professor of women's studies and sexuality at the UW. She was talking about AI as plagiarism software. And I was like, "Oh," like, that captures it a bit for
Yep.
me. Like, it's taking things that are already out in the world and turning it into what?
Yes, and it's funny because sometimes when I'm looking for people to talk, to invite to the podcast, there have been several times when I've read an article about, for example, 6 ways that AI will not replace human creativity, and I've tried to track down the author, either to find that the author doesn't exist
Mm,
or the author generated it using AI, and is very happy to let me know, unlike other authors who would never confess to using AI, which I find kind of even more disturbing. It's one thing to use
mm,
it and to attribute and acknowledge it. It's another thing to use it and then to pass it off as your own, because I think that part of your brain that might recognize it as AI, once that's not reinforced, you start to question yourself about whether or not you're able to tell the difference. But I like that uh, plagiarism software. I can see this episode title taking place even as we speak. Even as we speak. What is it? You work with young women and gender expansive youth. What would you like them to take away about AI and the use of it in their world? Has that even come
ooh.
up?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, so we have a program called, Why We Tech.
Why
Um,
why be tech?
yeah,
Oh,
mhm.
yeah, okay, Y dash B. Tech. Got
Why
you.
we tech. So why we stands for Young Women Empowered, but we also use it as both a question and a statement for all of our programs. So like,
Brilliant, Reagan.
why do
Real
we
okay,
write?
girl.
Why do we create? Why do we, why do we tech? Why do tech?
I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. That is so sharp. Okay,
Well,
okay.
I
Keep
can't I
going,
can't take
please.
credit for that. That's a Rose Waterstone original. I like to attribute the sources. But it's something I love about why we is and it keeps me really focused as I'm working through designing new programs about like, why are we doing this program? Like what do we want
Yes.
the young people to get out of it? And for this program tech, I live in Seattle, Washington. It is completely saturated with all the big tech companies, right? We've got Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, Niantic, like the Pokemon Go is is here, right? And what I find though is that the ways in which school is teaching technology is at times not accessible to our demographic of youth, particularly to BIPOC, first gen immigrants, girls and women, non-binary folks. Like they largely feel excluded from the ways in which technology is being taught, and so our program is to kind of supplement that, is to give them connections with folks in the community who can help show them a pathway into these fields that are so high paying and actually can like create generational wealth.
I love it.
Um, and yeah, so we definitely have discussions on all of these things. We've talked about uh, the ways in which, because a lot of the folks who are designing tech do not look like them or do not come from their communities, create tech that is not responsive to the needs of their communities or isn't representative. Um, yeah, so my hope in that is for that in the future. I want there to be more voices in the room when tech is being designed, that kind of have a lived experience that could influence the ways in which it evolves.
It's interesting that you say that because I had I'd gone to a webinar, and there's a book out by, and let me get this, put on the old spectacles here. Oh, Joy Buolamwini, and I'm murdering that name. It's spelled Buolamwini. And she wrote a book called Unmasking AI. And she did that because, as an African American woman, when she was testing some of the large language models on facial recognition,
Hmm.
they weren't recognizing her dark skin until she literally took a mask that was white and put it over her face. And then AI recognized her as a human being. And she was like, OMG, you know, um, what is going on here? And she wrote a really, the book came out in November, I believe it was. It was part of the LA Times book club presentation, but it was very jarring to realize, as you said, these programs are created by humans and are going to reflect human bias, period. And if you're not in there in the development stage, then you suffer, most definitely.
Absolutely. The Dalai Lama a long time ago, pre-COVID, visited Seattle, and somebody
Hmm.
had asked him the question, "What is the meditation that the world needs now?" And his answer is one that always really has stuck with me, and it's critical thinking followed by action.
Oh, love that.
And for me, when we talk about I need there to be some critical thinking. And I don't
You
want
think?
AI to like replace that. Like, like let's not use that as a shortcut. Like,
Yes, honey. Okay, critical thinking followed by AI. Well, on that note, I have you have very, very clearly articulated your issues with AI. Is there anything else that you would like to add or about the topic?
I guess just while while I stand in obviously vehement opposition to the ways in which AI is developing, it's kind of like when the internet developed, like you can't necessarily stop a train. Like this is a thing that's happening. So the question becomes like, how can we apply critical thinking? How can we make sure that there's nuance in the ways in which we're stewarding the evolution of this technology, and that all, many voices are in the room to make those decisions and to be, oh yeah, to be a part of, to be a part of this process. And that I would like to see AI serve some useful function. I don't know exactly yet what that will be.
Sure.
um, but the alternative, the idea of all the damage it could cause is pretty scary. So for me, like that's a way in which I mitigate fear, is to try to build into possibilities of hopefulness, or what things can be. So while I'm like, "Ooh, I don't want to do it," I'm not gonna ignore that this thing exists.
Here, here. I think that that mantra, critical thinking followed by action, is one way of dealing with the sometimes overwhelming hopelessness or powerlessness that people can feel in the face of these entities, for lack of a better word. But there is, if there's one thing I've learned, and even in this teeny tiny little podcast, is that when it comes to AI, we're all beginners and we're all learning, and everyone has something to contribute and a voice, most definitely. So, Miss Reagan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Kathy. It was a pleasure, and I hope your listeners will consider pre-ordering my book. It's live on the Hinton Publishing website.
That's right. I had written down the name of the book, and of course now I cannot find it. Would you repeat it again,
Yeah, it's
please?
still true. The evolution of an unexpected journalist.
Excellent. And also, I want listeners to check out your TED Talk on the visionary pragmatism of communities of belonging. I found that just fascinating, and how you connected it back to, you know, your own roots and your own childhood. I thought was fabulous. Thank you for
Oh,
your time, lady.
thank you. Take care.